So welcome everyone as we continue to explore the dependent co-arising or dependent origination, codependent horizon, whatever we might call it, as we explore those 12 links that the Buddha spoke about. As I said last session, it's a key teaching of the Buddha in that when he spoke of his awakening, he spoke of the either in terms of seeing the Four Noble Truths or seeing the 12 links of dependent origination. So in that sense, they're the two key teachings within this tradition, and they're also the two teachings that are common to all the different lineages within Buddhism, whether it be Theravadan, Mahayana, Tibetan. They all have these core teachings as part of their what is taught. It's also one of the teachings that I found the most useful personally. And I'm always surprised that it's one that's not taught all that often within the insight meditation community, perhaps taught more within Tibetan traditions. So today's session, it's exploring the one of the links, just one today. And no, I'm not going to go on for 12 weeks exploring the 12. Well, this one in particular is quite important, quite central. So I'd like to spend the session exploring what is called ignorance or delusion. How many people have heard of either one of those terms in relation to this practice? Ignorance or delusion, yeah. And then the Buddha used both words, and there are different words depending on the context. He tended to use delusion when he talked about, greed, hatred, and delusion, the three poisons, the root of the suffering, the grasping, the aversion, and the delusion. And then he tended to use the word which is translated into as ignorance when he's talking about the 12 links. Now, it's not my favorite word in terms of, it's just a word, but in terms of what it conjures up in our minds in this time and culture and society, it tends to conjure up, somebody who's kind of maybe stupid or not, an ignorant person. It has this kind of negative connotation, how it feels, at least to me. So, we can use other words, but you'll hear that word, but it's not meant to mean perhaps what your mind jumps to in terms of its meaning is meaning uneducated or stupid in any way. And I'll talk about what it does mean. So this wheel, and this is one link on this wheel of 12 links. And I'll tell you what the 12 are, and it always starts with ignorance. And that's usually where, if somebody is teaching this, they'll start. And then it goes to volitional formations, thoughts, emotions, consciousness, the mind body that we have here, the senses and sense objects, the contact. Now, we've talked about what that is in the past, but we'll go over that. The sense objects and consciousness, and then of course feelings, the Vedana, the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, then craving, then clinging, and then coming to be, birth, and death. And I'll talk about what all those mean as we work our way through these 12 links. Now, not, so these 12 links show, how we create suffering in our lives, but they also show a way out. I think I said that last week. It's the problem and the solution are within those 12 links. Now, perhaps you've noticed something as I went through those links, that there's some similarity to the Four Noble Truths, because there's craving and clinging to pleasant, unpleasant experiences, which is what the Four Noble Truths is saying causes suffering. This clinging, wanting the pleasant and pushing away the unpleasant. So there's that real similarity there. One more thing before I move on. Not all the links are a problem. So it's not like you're trying to, so you're going to have consciousness, you're going to have mind body, you're going to have sense doors, you're going to have contact, and you're going to have feeling tone. Those are always going to be part of your life as long as you're alive. It's really then it's really the ignorance, craving, clinging that are the key ones that we'll spend more time exploring, because that's where suffering arises, and suffering therefore can cease. So it's the craving and clinging that cause the birthing of a self that makes life stressful and a struggle. The self gets continually rebirthed whenever there's clinging, craving and clinging, because it's the self needs this sense of self gets perpetuated with the clinging, the craving and clinging. So that's the sense of rebirth. You don't have to look at this as, cycling through life cycles, being reborn in another life. It's really, to me, the self being reborn moment by moment whenever there's clinging. Whenever there's a self being reborn, there's suffering. Period. Each and every time. Yeah. And that's what I was pointing to in the guided meditation, was how we can see that. We can see the little contraction in the heart when the mind craves or clings. We see the mind, it creates the mind and the heart, they are so interconnected that there's this little contraction, not always so little, but even a very subtle craving or clinging, there's a little contraction in the heart, and of course a very grand craving or clinging attachment. There can be quite a intense contraction in the heart. So it's by really, I think, sensing into the heart that we can really feel in our direct experience suffering being created moment by moment with this rebirthing of a self. It shows how suffering arises. So ignorance or delusion. Avidya is the word in the Avijja. Literally means the failure to see or know. Vidya is to know, and if you put an a in front of it, it negates it. So in a sense, it's not knowing. But I'm trying to remember. A teacher said this to me. It just popped into my head decades ago, that it's ignorance is not so much not knowing, it's thinking you know. But what you think you know is not reality. Because you think you know, right? I mean, the reality that the trance mind, ego mind is created, we all think it's reality. We think we know. So me telling you that you're, the the mind, the conceptual mind, what it's created is a fabrication, and it's just a dream. It's an illusion. That kind of goes, well, wait a minute, that's not what I know. My mind knows that, this is reality. I'm a self, and I'm separate from everything else, and there's all these things that happen to this self, and yeah. So in that sense, it's I kind of, it stuck with me. I can't. I'm sorry. It was a, a very young Zen teacher that said it to me, and that it's ignorance is knowing, but it's a knowing that's an illusionary knowing. You really do think you know. So this ignorance is so critical in this practice, because in a sense, if you're the opposite of it is wisdom. If you can shift your perspective and see things as they really are, and see reality as it really is, it kind of ends right there. It's like the rest of the 12 links, just, there is no craving or clinging, right? So to me, it's kind of a direct path. If you can see through the very first link, it is in a sense awakening. You've awakening to the way things are. You've awakened from the dream state, from the trance state. So that's why I give it one session, and it is very much a direct path, because it's simply a shift in perspective, a shift in perception. So you see that what is actually what is fabricated in the mind is actually an illusion that's taken to be reality. And if you can see that, you no longer cling and crave to what's arising in each moment. You can allow everything to be just as it is. So this shift, so in a sense, I kind of look at avijja as a misperception. It might be for me, the more accurate description of it is a misperception, misunderstanding. It's misperception of reality. So if you can think back in your life, perhaps when you were younger, when you had you had a perspective that you held passionately, that you really believed it. I mean, you held it really passionately, and believed this with every, you knew that this was true. This was a perspective that you held, vigorously. And then at some point in your life, something shifted and your perspective shifted, and you believe something else. It's like this. Except it's not a belief. It's not a belief that's shifting, but it's got that sense to it of it being a shift. And it can happen anytime. It can happen anytime. So when you talk about spontaneous awakening in some traditions, they're really talking about this direct, spontaneous shift that arises where consciousness or awareness knows itself, reveals it as your true nature. And it can happen to any time. Somebody could pop into this group for their first time, listen to a guided meditation and a talk, and that shift could occur. Causes and conditions just happen to be there. Of course, somebody could be doing this for 50 years and the shift not occur. So it's kind of a level for you that are newer to this. It's kind of a level playing field in that sense. It's because it can happen at any time. So ignorance is the basis of all suffering that arises. It's the causal basis of our suffering. Misunderstanding of reality or the nature of self. So we see this inherent existence of a self. Right, so it's really seeing this deeply. Now we may believe, or we may truly understand, we may have had the insight that our sense of self is impermanent, that it's conditioned by many factors and has, it's constantly shifting and flowing. We may have had some taste or insight of that the self, there's no reality, there's no inherent reality to the self, has no inherent reality. So the question is, why do we react emotionally when we feel whether we feel hurt or frustrated, impatient, offended? Why do we feel hurt? This is really where we can investigate. We can see it's essential for us to remember that the root of our belief in self is primarily our emotional reactivity that we're investigating. That we can see how that emotional reactivity is rooted in a belief in a separate self. And that's the misperception. That's the misperception that we're exploring and seeing. To see that misperception, to see our true nature. Now the Buddha talked about what ways that we perceive of ourselves. We tend to think of ourselves as one of 5 things, or a combination of these 5 things. Body. We see ourselves as this body. We can see ourselves as the one that has the feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. We can see ourselves as our perceptions, kind of our likes and dislikes of whatever it might be, of our volitional formations, thoughts and emotions, or our consciousness, or of each, of consciousness. I don't mean consciousness at the big consciousness of awareness or true nature, but consciousness that's aware of what's coming in through the sense doors, consciousness of sound. So we can, the Buddha talked about those as the five aggregates, and those are we cling to those as a sense of self, which causes suffering. The Buddha had a wonderful, I don't know if you'd call it a poem, a kind of a statement where he talks about form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. Form is like a ball of foam. Feeling is like a water bubble. Perception is like a mirage. Volitional formations are like a plantain trunk. It's empty in its core. And consciousness is like an illusion. And those images just kind of really, the foam is as much substance as foam, a bubble, a mirage, an empty trunk of a tree, or just simply an illusion. So we're seeing through, we're seeing this misperception. Another quote from the Buddha: when ignorance is abandoned and knowledge arises, with the ending of ignorance and the arising of knowledge, people cling neither to sense pleasures, nor to views, nor to precepts and vows, nor to a self-doctrine. Not clinging, he is not disturbed. Not disturbed, he attains individual nibbana, or freedom or awakening. When ignorance is abandoned, when this misperception, when there's when there is a shift in perception, there's not clinging. And when there's no clinging, there's no disturbance, no struggle, and that's what nibbana is. So the road to wisdom is a shift in perception. And the practice that I was pointing to as part of that shift in perception was letting everything be as it is. So this is a practice, right? Like you're not gonna, the shift in perception isn't something you hear and then it just happens. It's something you see in your direct experience with practice. I mean, that's what attracted me to this whole game in the first place. So this whole Buddhist thing, or this mindfulness thing, or it's what drew me in was, well, a yearning for truth, but also, which is primarily what drew me in. But then that this can come about through practice. It's not like, here's what you need to believe, and you believe it and everything will be fine. It's something you really see for yourself. So it's the practice that's so crucial in this. At any moment of practice, a shift in perception can occur. Allowing everything to be as it is. So you're getting out of the struggle of the mind and sensing into your true nature, or into awareness. So that they talk about, a shift from conceptual mode, or shift out of the mind, the trance. The trance is the ego trance that is created in the mind. It's thoughts. that are creating it. So we're getting out of that conceptual mode and getting into and sensing into a experiential stance. And that's really all meditation is we're allowing ourselves to just be, to just be. And of course, we can create, we can hear, allow everything to be as it is, and we can create a struggle out of that. The mind can, the ego mind, create a struggle out of anything. It needs struggle. It can't, the ego self can't survive without struggle. If struggle goes away, it's got nothing to do. It thrives on struggle. That's why we say, anything you resist is just feeding this trance state, this ego mind, this misperception. Anything that you resist, including thoughts. So allowing thoughts to be as they are. I mean, it doesn't mean, it means we're not following thoughts, but we're not struggling with them. They're not seen as a problem or something that we have to get rid of, because that's struggling with what is. So it's the relation to thoughts is, because the mind will play tricks. You're never going to outsmart yourself if you start playing games with the mind. I can tell you, I did it for years. You're never going to outsmart yourself. You're never going to outsmart your mind with your mind. Does that make sense? You're never going to. It's going to be a war that you'll never win. You'll never. So all you can do is simply allow what's present to be as it is. So allow, there's thinking, just allowing, noticing it, seeing it, not following it, simply seeing. Does that make sense? And we can make a struggle out of not being the meditator. You've probably heard me say, let go of the sense of a meditator. Well, we can make, the mind will make a struggle at, I got to get rid of the meditator. The meditator's getting in the way. So there's we can make a struggle out of that. So it's even letting, if there's a sense of a meditator present, allowing it to be as it is. This sense of resistance to what's arising moment by moment is so crucial to peace and freedom. So I think it's something we should teach kids in kindergarten. Hey kids, anything that comes up in your experience, anything you resist, it's gonna get stronger. And anything you just allow, it'll just fade on its own. You don't have to worry about it. It'll just fade on its own. I think we should really, in kindergarten, we should start telling kids this. And they can get the idea that what we resist intensifies, persists. So letting go of all that, letting go of resistance, letting go of resisting judgment, of the meditator, of thoughts. Those tend to be the typical ones that as people get deeper into this practice, that there's some sticking points around letting go of resistance. Because when I say allow everything to be as it is, I mean everything. Not, half of what comes up, or not some of it, or most of it, or everything but this. It's everything. Allow everything to be as it is. Now, of course, we had some sessions on fear, and when you allow everything to be as it is, what happens is fears will start to bubble up, and really the things that you're afraid of, right, that you get a real kind of almost immediate resistance start to come up. And I mean, that's what will start to reveal itself in this practice. So then you're allowing an opening to these kinds of fears that might come up, that most often will come up. So opening to everything. I think we've seen in our in this practice some of you have been involved with me in this for many months, and I think we're starting to see together that we cannot control what we experience. We cannot control life. And this is really what the self, in resisting anything, is trying to do. It's struggling. Even struggling, it's wanting to sort of, make sure the future's okay for the self. Even I think rumination on the past is really just wanting it's for the future. It's wanting the future. It's kind of got this future focus, and we're just allowing that to be as well, because we can sort of bring in this sense of I'm allowing things to be so that something will happen in the next moment. That's self talking. That's the conceptual mind, the trance state. That's how it would think, right? I got to do this in order for this to happen. I'm going to allow everything to be so that awakening arises. Well, there's no future. It's allowing everything to be in just this moment. If a thought about the future arises, it's just seen as a thought arising about the future. So it's just this moment. It's allowing everything to be, so everything, and then just now in this moment. So you're not concerned about what's going to happen the next moment. And you'll get these little moments of freedom where the heart is spacious and peaceful. You'll see it'll arise when you step out of the trance, when this trance state, when you're not engaged with the trance state, with the conceptual mind, your true nature naturally reveals itself. You don't have to do anything. It just naturally kind of fills in. And I hope you get tastes of that when you're sitting, when you're in a meditative stance and you're allowing everything to be as it is. And there's just this moment where there's no struggle and you feel something in the heart. You can just feel this peace and vastness just reveal itself. And you're not doing anything except just sitting there and being. I get tears will flow down my face just from moments of this. And this is seeing this is so central to this practice, is getting that taste and dwelling more and more in that sense of just dwelling in that awareness, that true nature. So yeah, the mind always wants a particular future. That's something. So allowing everything to be as it is in the present moment may not be in line with the mind's preferred future, but those are all just mind projections. So you can just allow all that mind projection to be as it is. And as I said, when we stop interfering with what is, awareness naturally reveals itself. And we get out of the trance ego mind. And a wheel of freedom starts to spin rather than a wheel of suffering. And this is just with the first link. This is just with ignorance or delusion. Just seeing, allowing everything to be as it is and just seeing, not tinkering, not interfering. The seeing is already liberated. So the sequence of the wheel ends all by itself, just through the seeing. It's not done by personal will. It just ends on its own. When you see thoroughly enough, there's no longer identification with anything. There's no self being reborn. The self gets reborn in each moment, but there's clinging. So there's no clinging, no attachment, no identification with what's arising. There's no rebirth of the self and no death of the self moment by moment. So you see the emptiness. It's another word. Seeing that the emptiness of self or the emptiness of an object is the same as saying you're seeing it, that it's dependently co-arising, it's dependently originated. Allowing everything to be as it is in each moment. And really sensing into that, what that feels like. So sensing into it in your heart, in your heart space. So getting a direct experience of it. Because you do feel that there is a contraction in the heart. It's very, very visceral. And there is an opening, a sense of spaciousness or opening in the heart in the moments of complete letting go. So I'll open it up for questions and comments.
My thoughts are still a little all over the place, but you've been talking about being with your experience as it is. You've been talking about we can't control our experience. And in previous weeks, you've also talked about how thoughts just arise. It's not we're choosing to have the thought, they just arise. Feelings, they just come. And there isn't, ultimately, there isn't a responsibility for it. And I've been finding that, I've been reflecting a lot on that in my practice lately, and I've been finding it very liberating. And I've been sort of trying an approach where I sort of try and feel connected with sort of broader consciousness or the divine, and sort of look at myself as temporarily just being present in this body, and sort of thinking of it as, you know, evolutionary, for evolutionary reasons, this body does things in certain ways. There's, you know, a reptilian brain somewhere there. There's all kinds of things that are happening that sort of come up that have really nothing to do with anything I think I'm choosing to do. But a lot of things that just really don't fit with who I see myself as being. So you have a thought that comes up, feeling, I think, well, that's not who I see myself as, and I don't like that. And so there can be sort of feelings of, I suppose, guilt, shame, all kinds of emotions come up with those kind of things that sort of push away. And as I've been sort of feeling, I'm sort of more observing just this temporary entity that just happens to function in a certain way, I've been finding it liberating. And it doesn't really last, but this sort of sense that these things are beyond my control and it's okay, I think it's allowing me to move a little bit more into allowing the experience to be just as it is. Anyways, that's what's been going on with my practice lately.
I had a thought, Stephen, when you were saying it's kind of a level playing field, that somebody could come their first session and have an insight, I guess, and another person 50 years. So there's a thing, I don't know, a saying, I don't know, that you'll see it when you're ready to see it. So that person that comes on their first time and has an insight or whatever, versus the other one that comes for 50 years, like somehow I'm thinking of that is related to the concept of causes and conditions. Something allowed that first timer to see it, and the other one didn't see it for so long. It's I don't know, that's where I'm thinking, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, it's causes and conditions, as you said. It's got nothing to do with what you're doing. There's nothing you can do to speed up or slow down awakening. The self will come up with all kinds of ideas. This is coming out of a trance state, all kinds of ideas that will speed up. I mean, the self kind of likes the idea of being awakened. The self will go, oh, this would be kind of cool. You know, I'd be like super cool if I was awakened. I could dress snappy like an awakened person, and people would want to be around me, and I'd walk into a post office and everybody would just kind of feel immediately tranquil and peaceful, and the self loves that idea, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we say when we say, because if the self gets involved in awakening, oh boy, you got 20 years of torture, because you're gonna just keep spinning through these new ideas. The self will conjure up new ideas. The self will conjure up new ideas about how it can become awakened. So somebody could be doing this for 20 years and just, going down those rabbit holes on how to become awakened. And the self can conjure up all kinds of ideas about why this practice is not going to lead to, awakening, or why it's why I should, it doesn't make sense because am I just going to be a couch potato? Am I going to just, am I not going to be doing anything in the world? Am I going to, not going to have a personality? So that it'll also come up with the other side of the equation. So it is it is causes and conditions coming together, and some people hear the teaching and have some experience with feeling into it, and there's a shift, and I won't speculate in terms of why, and people could have a shift and then resist it. The self could step in and resist it. So you also have to be open to allowing the shift. You have to be willing. There has to be a willingness, some kind of willingness to know the truth that arises as well. That I wouldn't worry too much about the level playing field thing. That just kind of came to me. It wasn't. It's not really crucial, but in terms of the direct path, I guess the direct approach it has some importance because it's pointing to a direct shift in perception as opposed to a gradual process of insights that where you gradually see impermanence, and you gradually see the truth of dukkha, and you gradually see these different, and it's a collection of a process of kind of chipping away at the wheel. This isn't a chipping away. This is a new wheel. You're not chipping away or hammer strokes on the. It's like a new wheel appears, and you realize that you've been caught in a dream, in a trance state, and that that's the root of suffering. And it seems so obvious, like, yeah, this is what is at the root of suffering. So next week I'll also talk about the more gradual, and this isn't an insight. The shift in perception is a complete shift. It's not really an insight. It has a different. I mean, we could get into word games, but we tend to talk about insights as glimpses into aspects of how suffering is created. If we're going to call this an insight, it's a damn big one. It's the one and only one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Stephen, I think I heard you say that there's nothing we can do to speed it up or slow it down. It being the seeing or the I'm not sure what you meant by
awakening.
The awakening. Okay. But, and then in the next then I think I'm hearing that by practice, if we don't practice, we'll never get there. If we do practice, we have a chance of seeing, of awakening. So there is something we can do, is there not? Or do we just practice in spite of ourselves because of causes and conditions? And I'm lost in that one.
You're entirely correct. The thing that you can do is practice.
But that's it, and then let go from there. Is that right?
But just be cognizant if it's a self that's practicing. It's tricky. It's a bit of a paradox, right? Because I'm on one hand saying, there's nothing you can do, and on the other hand, I'm giving you advice on things to do.
Yes.
And ways,
Thought.
chances to approach what you do. I mean, there's a whole lot of things really that I put out there that could be called doing.
Doing.
But really, another slogan that really resonates me is it's the seeing is the doing. The seeing is the doing. So that's all you need to do. Keep it really simple. Just see what's arising in the present moment. The seeing is enough. In a sense, we overcomplicate it tremendously. Our minds love complications, right? Their minds just love complex problems. I mean, it just thrives on it. So when you give when you give somebody something that simple, they kind of go, well, I want my money back. That just doesn't sound that just doesn't sound like enough, right? I need more than seeing is the doing. I mean, but that's it. The more complexity you give the mind, the more it just gets entrenched in the trance mode. I mean, I could give you a whole talk on the nature of big C consciousness and awareness, because that's what I keep telling you to tune into or sense into. But that just gives the mind more stuff to fool around with. So then you're in the mind, you're in the conceptual mode. So in a sense, for a shift in perception to happen, it won't happen in the conceptual trance mind. It'll happen in your direct experience in seeing, your direct experience in the present moment. So the direct path is really about, and you'll see this in Zen, just sit. You'll see, yeah, and they'll take sutras that are 1,000 pages long and I kind of like it because they'll give you a page and a half. And here's the sutra. Wow, that's a lot. That's great, And the idea is to get away from making everything so complex and just kind of boil it down to a simple essence so that you can just engage at this kind of level of this experiential level, non-conceptual. And koans have that flavor too, getting you out of the conceptual mind. Have you heard of Zen koans? Who were you before your parents were born? Who are you before you have a thought about who you are? Or so you can't answer that with the conceptual mind. So it keeps throwing you. You go in to talk to the teacher, and you go, well, the way I look at it is, and you give them this big formulaic answer. And of course, the Zen teacher will just, depending on the era, anything from hit you with a stick to now they just kind of, ring the bell and, out you go, wrong, kind of like, the what was that TV show where they had that gong when you got the wrong answer? I think it was called The Gong Show, and it's that kind of flavor. But it's just, and you just keep going back, and it's when you can just break out of the conceptual mode and into just this. Who are you before you have a thought about who you are? Just allow that koan to sink into the deepest part of your being. Like, really, who are you before you have a thought about who you are? The self is creating you, rebirthing you moment by moment with its struggle. It's clinging. To me, clinging is synonymous with struggle, struggling with what is moment by moment, because you're struggling with wanting pleasant, not pushing away unpleasant.
I feel like I've been in a few weeks of ignorance um, because my example is struggling with work where I was in an acting manager role, and we finally got a manager to come in, and I became very sensitive to the changes in my world, and the hierarchy, the status, who's talking to whom, and it was sort of weird because I really had to pull back and try to understand what my feelings were and where they were rooted. And what I really liked about what you said earlier in your talk was the idea of the when the self arises, which it was definitely happening for me because I was it was very much me thinking me. Um, Ignorance is there, and because I was thinking about myself and I was thinking about the um, the dynamics that were going on, and it was a really uncomfortable experience. I mean, being in that mode, and it took a little while. It literally took a few weeks of letting go, trying not to think too much about it, trying to feel like I could not think about it in a sense, and that it felt better. It was a little bit more freeing, and so when you're talking about this, like almost like that that relationship between self and ignorance, it really connected with me and made me it gave me something to in a sense to put words to that experience of this past little while. So thanks.
I think we've kind of covered this before in terms of letting go and pursuing goals, but I would benefit from kind of discussing it again. I kind of felt what you were saying about like having a thought and then the heart contracting today when I was kind of strategizing and kind of planning a career transition. And it's like, okay, I need to check all these boxes. And it's like each time, like one of those little like to-dos comes up, then it's like a little contraction. So I was just wondering if you could talk about kind of the balance between like letting go and still kind of pursuing goals and careers.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really important question. It's there's two ways to come at answering that. One is when I talk about thoughts and the trance state of thoughts, I'm talking about 95% of your thoughts that are just chatter. Not well, maybe 90, might be 90. I figure practical thinking is somewhere between 5 and 10% of our thinking. And practical thoughts that you need to navigate the relative world. And to navigate the relative world, you think about career, you might plan, write a resume, all that. That's what I call practical mind. And you know when you're engaged in practical mind, as opposed to the self referential trance mind, in that there's no contraction in the heart. You're simply doing. There's just this simple unfolding of what needs to be done. So yeah, that's one way to come at this. We're lay people practicing in the world, which is great because the world is where you can really see where the self-referential trance mind creates suffering. It happens in so many moments that there's so many opportunities to see. So you need, but to operate in that as a layperson in the world, you need that practical mind, the practical mind that plans and navigates the world. The other way to come at this is when there's a shift in perception. Doing arises from a deeper place of what's essential, from your essential self, not from a self-referential self. Yeah, so it becomes a different way of doing, and I, I've had this question with teachers in terms of shifts in perspective that may not be a complete, mind-blowing, rotation, but real intense tastes and a real sense of it. That will also shift where kind of spontaneous doing can arise and what kind of spontaneous, because when what you do in the world comes from a deeper place, Alan used the word divine, or it comes from that spirit or divine or non-egoic or what are other words? It's your essential being from being. Then they're quite different than actions that come out of a protective self, a separate self that needs to protect itself. Can you see that? You see how that would be so different? Yeah, how acting without that sense of needing to protect yourself or control everything, how that really is freeing. Even a little, seeing that a little bit can be a little bit freeing in how you operate. So that's the two ways to kind of come at it. Practical mind is necessary, and the other is glimpses or even total shifts in perception will shift, where the doing in the world comes from. All the problems in the world, the hunger, the suffering, come out are a manifestation of selves being reborn and acting in the world with self-referential doing. There are no problems. In an ultimate sense, there are no problems. We create all of them. Every time the mind struggles, it's creating problems. So you can see how different acting, being from that place and you know, pursuing careers and working with people, you know, interacting with people and working in society could be so different. But that's, you know, just to back up to my very first statement: practical mind, totally necessary. How I know if I'm engaged from, you know, engaged in practical mind is and especially if there's the sense of a, you know, of self, of being self-referential, not being self-referential, is I look for the heart, what's being felt in the heart. One of my early teachers, I think I've mentioned him here, is Gregory Kramer. Actually, I just started listening to some of his talks. It's got like 10-minute talks on Dharma Seed. Who does 10-minute talks? But they're great. I mean, it's just like, boom, here it is. He's always was kind of a man of, you know, few words. And he taught me, and he wanted me to actually, he was the first one that encouraged me to teach insight dialogue. And it's really bringing a meditative stance into your interactions with other people. I could do a talk on this at some point. Really it's got a lot to, you know, to do with sensing into the heart and what's arising, and seeing if there's a craving, clinging self that's behind how you're listening and behind what you are about to share. Right? So when you're listening, when somebody's speaking, is your little voice in your head going, okay, what am I going to say now? You're not really listening to the person. You're going, okay, I'm going to say this. I think I really need to say this if I'm going to get my point across. Or if I say this, is that going to sound intelligent? Or, well, you know, so you can see it. So there's really no listening going on at all. There's really just the self chattering away while you're talking, waiting for its turn to chatter away. So the other, you know, if you can have these two trans selves having this little conversation where there's really no connecting going on at all. And this practice is really about connecting. So yeah, the example of insight dialogue comes to mind when I think about, you know, how we can tune into the heart space while we're engaging in the world, as a reference to where it's coming from our essential nature and sense of connection, or is it coming from the ego mind? That's a long answer to a really good question. I hope I yeah.
Thank you.
I should take some notes from Gregory.
Stephen, I wonder if I'd just like to explore a little more that comment you made about there really aren't any problems, and you've made that before. So I'm trying to understand this in relation to, for example, you've talked in the past about the two arrows. So you break your leg, there's pain, and there's a certain suffering from that. And then we create a lot of the suffering in our mind in reaction to that, resisting and so forth. But the basic pain of your broken leg, isn't that a problem? Or if I'm living somewhere where there's drought and famine and people are starving, isn't that a problem? Or why would you not see those as problems?
Yeah. The whole Dharma talk there. And, you know, your two examples are quite different. One is a form of dukkha that's called dukkha. It's kind of the inevitable pain that we might feel moving through the world, like stubbing our toe, or, you know, it happens, right? And well, is that a problem? It's suffering arising.
Sounds like a problem to me.
Pain arising. Is that a problem? I mean, pain is inevitable as a human being. Part of being a human being is you will experience pain, illness, and old age. Is old age a problem? you're gonna get old. If you think it's a problem, you got a you got a problem, right? You've created a problem out of something that's natural. So it's natural to feel pain. It's natural to get old. So you're seeing it as a problem is simply resisting nature arising.
But like with the broken leg, I could see that as, like, to me, a problem, you look for a solution. So you break your leg, you get medical treatment, and then the pain goes away. It's not a pain, it's not a problem in that sort of sense, because you're looking for a solution.
Yeah, so so when I talk about well, we can split hairs on this, right? It's suffering arises. You getting a broken. You're a human being with a body that can break, right? So that's natural for it to break. So that's the first arrow. The leg broke. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you don't treat the leg. You know, of course, you do what's appropriate. You treat the leg, and you heal, and you move forward. So in that sense, it's not a problem. It's nature unfolding. That's just nature unfolding. Now, we can create a lot of suffering with the story about why me. Perhaps you have a big story that you did something stupid. Listen, I broke my foot dancing. Can you imagine the stories I had? Do you guys remember that when I was wearing the air cap? I did that dancing. The mind, so I had lots of stories, but broken foot, that just arose. I mean, there was a crack on the stage and I hit it with flip-flops on, foot went over, broken foot, broken bone, just what is. I could have, and the mind wanted to make a big problem out of it. So in that sense, it's not a problem, it's simply nature unfolding. It's not a problem. And even, and then the other example was famine. So, and this gets difficult when you start talking about global problems, right? Because it's, but I'll say even in that case, it's ignorance, not seeing reality as it is, that has all these ego selves, ego me's out there in the world doing things that are creating famines and hunger and right. So from an ultimate sense, those aren't problems. Those are problems created due to I'll use the word ignorance, and I don't mean stupidity. That from that not seeing reality as it truly is, not seeing things as they truly are. So that's a very provocative statement to make, and I can understand how the mind will have some difficulty, but that's where it's coming from is that sense. Yeah. I won't say anymore, because at this point, what I'm doing is entertaining your minds, right? I could talk about all kinds of abstract ideas like this, and I've done that in talks. I've sat down to give a talk, and I started, and I realized these are all professionals or something, and nobody's really interested in meditating. If I sat here and spoke about meditation and I do it for like 10 minutes, and then I start to see the yawning and the shifting in the chair. So then I'll just entertain their minds for the next 45 minutes, so they at least leave somewhat happy. And That's not what I do here, right? I tend to be very direct. But what I was doing there was a bit of mind entertaining. So when you start to get, oh yeah, is there really a problem? Like it's really fun for the mind to roll that over. But it's I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, we go through life with this practice, trying not to create problems, trying not to harm. And what that means is letting go of the self-referential ego mind. Non-harming is just a moralistic way of saying, you know, wise mind, letting go of delusion, seeing, or allowing, you know, seeing the shift, the true nature, reality. All those, even the Eightfold Path, look at them, they're all pointing to the same thing. I mean, the first one is right view. If you got right view, everything else is going to happen. Right view is seeing things as they are. If you see things as they are, you're not going to harm anybody. You're going to have right speech. You're going to have right livelihood. You're going to all the other things. You're going to be mindful. It's just they all just so really. I like both of them because the first one in both of them, it's all you need. Right view and wisdom. You got, if you get, you know, either one, whether it's the Eightfold Path or the 12 links, if you get the first one, you're golden. The rest of it just falls into place. If you don't get the first one, now we got to start working on all the other ones, right? I love the way the Buddha did that. Oh, here's the first one, and you get that, you're golden. If you don't, then I've got 7 more or 11 more for you to work on. It's just kind of a beautiful way to teach. So yeah, that struck me years ago. I'm thinking, oh, what if I have right view? I really don't need that. That's it. I'm basically awake. I've awakened. I've right view. I see things as they truly are. No sense of self, impermanence, dukkha. It's it. It's the beginning, the middle, and the end of the path. So next week I will talk about the other 11 links. So for the so basically, I mean, and you've heard this in many. Yeah, do you think that would be? I mean, it's basically clinging. It's a talk about clinging, which we've had many times. Or, you know, or I could give a talk about practicing letting everything be as it is. There's a whole practice there that's so crucial. And I think, but that'd be more on the direct, you know, this direct shift. Because, you know, I said some things about letting everything be as it is, but I could definitely say more. And I could say more about how we create problems and how that is the root of suffering, the struggle that creates problems. So there's really 3 talks there, isn't there? I don't know. Do you want me to decide myself? Yeah. I like practice talks. And I think, you know, we hear the phrase so many times, let things be as they are, you know, is the truth, you know, and that's how you see your true nature. And we hear that so many times, but do we really know what that means when we sit in our chair or cushion? Do you guys know what that means in terms of your practice? Like if I said, I want you to spend the next hour simply allowing everything to be as it is, would you know what how to approach that?
I don't know.
Yeah. Let me play around with that because I'll do it for a couple of days and then see what comes up. How about that? And then I'll send out an email. I forgot to send out an email. I'll send out an email and let you know. Good to see you all again. Take care, everyone. We will see
Thanks,
you
Steve.
next Thursday.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good week.
Too.